Hi, my name is Chris and I'm a PhD researcher with EASE and a graduate of the MA programme. This presentation is focused on a chapter from my dissertation, but because some of you may be considering a PhD, I thought it might be useful to give a bit more of an overview of what that might entail. As part of my dissertation, I performed a discourse analysis of how people talk about cats and cat-related issues. And today I'll tell you a bit about the discourses surrounding whether cats are better off kept indoors or permitted to roam. One question I am not tackling is whether cats are indeed better off confined or if they have a right to roam. But one of the suggested readings by Abate does attempt that. And of course, I'm happy to provide a convoluted response from a personal perspective, but my research does not attempt to provide answers in this respect. Rather, I seek to understand the discourses surrounding free roaming cats and how these are shaped by and affect cat-human relations. My current working title is A Right to Roam, a trans-species approach to understanding cat-human relations and social discourses associated with free roaming urban cats. And my research questions ask, what are the various discourses surrounding free roaming or free living cats? How do prominent points of contention relate to wider social discourses, such as those concerned with cat welfare, biopolitics, animal agency, and wildlife? And how do cats influence our humans and co-create meaning within the cat-human relationship? So my introductory chapter provides context for the dissertation and includes the overarching questions, aims, and objectives. I forewent the traditional literature review chapter because chapter-specific literature reviews just work better for my thesis format. I wrote a single methods chapter because data collection, the data itself, and methods used were not unique to each chapter. Chapters 3 through 7 are the empirical chapters, and today I'm going to focus on data and methods employed for chapters 3 through 5, namely the thematic discourse analysis approach I took. And the analysis of chapter 3 in particular, which is focused on discourses surrounding the so-called indoor-outdoor cat debate from the perspective of feline welfare or well-being. I first collected comments responding to 7 different news articles, magazine pieces, and a YouTube video. These were chosen to sample a variety of responses from both cat guardians and those not overly attached to cats. For example, the YouTube video by Jackson Galaxy discussed his take on whether you should keep your cat inside or not. And Galaxy's fan base of cat lovers ensured a wealth of reactions and responses from cat guardians around the world. The BBC and Daily Mail articles provided a means to sample some reactions from individuals who are less emotionally attached to cats, those concerned about wildlife predation, or generally not fond of cats. And what is kind of interesting about these is the majority of comments are not discussing the article's content, but rather using it as a platform to complain about predation and the perceived nuisance behaviours of cats in their urban neighbourhoods, or indeed to defend the cat's right to roam. The data consisted of just under 2,500 comments responding either to the main article or sub-comments, that is, those responding to other comments. Many of the comments contained information that just went beyond the scope of my thesis, and these were coded as off-topic and put to one side. This left a remainder of around 1,600 comments, which were assigned to one or more of 3 thematic groups that comprise the key chapters in my PhD dissertation. So group 1 are concerned with neighbourhood cats. Group 2 are comments related to concerns about wildlife predation by cats, and group 1, which addresses the indoor-outdoor debate from the perspective of cat welfare. And this is the largest group, containing over 900 comments and sub-comments. So it is this group 1, that I'm going to talk about today, which is comprised of comments related to discourses about cats from the perspective of cat guardians. So just to note, the percentages exceed 100 because some of the comments were assigned to more than one group. But please don't get hung up on the details of any graphs I show. I do put numbers on some of my results, especially in this chapter. And while the data would be amenable to quantitative analysis, that is not the approach I took. My coding was performed as a means to sort and retrieve data and to build upon emerging themes, not to make any definitive quantitative statements. However, because my data sets were quite large, I choose to show some visual representations and approximate numbers rather than simply claim most, or to point out that a particular observation is common or less common. And I'm a little bit struggling how best to present this information without inviting quantitative overinterpretation. So these 950 comments were coded as a separate data set. And most of these could be coded as either favoring keeping cats indoors or viewing roaming as the ideal scenario. Overall, from a cat welfare perspective, just under half of the comments indicated a preference towards confining companion cats. Slightly more believed allowing cats to roam freely was the ideal scenario, even if they acknowledged this was not always possible. So more comments speaking out in defense of free roaming cats were triggered in response to the articles on cat predation. So these last four columns. And were often sub-comments to opinions expressing how cats should be kept inside for the sake of wildlife. So several quantitative studies on attitudes towards free roaming cats have been conducted, with attitudes shown to vary within and between communities, although there appears to be distinct national trends towards favouring either indoor or outdoor cats. The two largest transnational studies were conducted by Hall et al. In 2016 and Foreman Worsley et al., which was published last year. So the practice of keeping cats indoors is more common amongst cat guardians in the US than Australia. And this is despite the Australian government stance on free-living cats and implementation of cat curfews and regional bans on keeping cats. In the UK, cat guardians are much more likely to insist their cats need to be able to roam outside than their American or Australian counterparts. And I don't have time to go into that today, but national bird organisations may be a driving force here. But independent of any national trends, different ideas emerge from my data regarding guardian responsibilities. For those who consider cats to be domestic animals who belong in the home, guardians who allow cats to wander are deemed irresponsible in terms of cat welfare, often pointing out the various dangers that might befall unsupervised cats and even shaming guardians who allow their cats to wander. Not infrequently, a tragic loss led to the decision to keep the current cat inside. And I coded these somewhat rather graphic stories as learn the hard way. Others viewed confinement as cruel, despite any risks, and believed that the risks outweighed the benefit to the cat's quality of life. So it essentially boils down to whether cats are viewed as either vulnerable dependents or free agents capable of looking after themselves. And to some extent, this connects to what I'm calling parenting types. But before I explain that further, I want to introduce my survey method, which provided qualitative data independent of the somewhat heated discussion that were taking place in the comment sections. So I designed a survey to build upon emerging themes and to obtain some demographic data to supplement the qualitative. Now, you might be looking at this slide and judging me for a poorly designed survey, but hear me out. So as a participant, I often draw a blank when faced with open-ended questions. I'm much more likely to engage with a survey that involves checking boxes. However, I sometimes find I want to comment on these because my answer is not as simple as the choice is given. And there's some research to suggest that other participants react similarly. So I designed a survey such that the Likert response was requested initially to encourage a reaction rather than to draw any meaningful data. So participants were first asked to mark on a 5-point Likert scale how they felt about said image or if they agreed or disagreed with a particular statement. So shown here is rather an innocuous looking cat. And as you can see, the majority of participants liked this image, with over one quarter were indifferent and 11 out of 75 disliked it. But do those who dislike it just not like cats? Perhaps they think it's a bad example of photography, or maybe they feel strongly that cats should be kept inside. So what I'm really interested in is a follow-up question of why they answered as they did. And it actually worked fairly well. except amongst those identifiable as academics. This group tended to reflect too much on the liquor question and comment that there was not enough context to provide an answer. Although they often went on to explain why that was, which provided the rich qualitative data that I was seeking, I sensed an annoyance in some of these responses. So in future, I would attempt to include some sort of explanation of why the questions are vague in the first part. Anyway, many people said they liked the image shown simply because they like cats, and this cat appeared happy and healthy. A few confessed they just really don't like cats. Some spoke of their concerns that outdoor cats kill wildlife. And there was one respondent who does not approve of neighborhood cats sitting on their car and assumes others think likewise. However, across the liquid spectrum were comments expressing pity or concern for cats being outside. And a series of statements or images following the same format as I've shown here provided qualitative data that could be similarly coded and analysed along with the comment data. So perceived outdoor dangers included traffic, wild predators, dogs or malicious humans, and there was no short supply of tragic stories that led people to explain why they now keep their cats inside. There's also a strong conviction that cats need to roam and that keeping them inside is very cruel despite any risk. And perceived risk did not necessarily correlate with potential actual risk. So these comments are tame compared to what I've witnessed on social media, but are typical examples of the judgments that cat guardians face when trying to do what they think is best for their cat. However, it's important to remember that while the indoor-outdoor debate can be quite polarizing, many people will recognize that there are exceptions. And at least from the cat welfare perspective, there is give. And there is a general recognition that location and circumstances need to be factored into decisions, as did the cats themselves. Although too often the cat was overlooked. There are examples of cats exerting their agency and even changing people's minds. So based on a hedonistic account of animal well-being, Abate in 2020 made a philosophical argument that cat guardians have a moral duty to provide their feline companions the opportunity to roam outside. Fisher contested this argument by comparing feline companions to a small child who loves to wander unaccompanied, pointing out that as a parent, you are accountable for both the child's safety and any damage they might cause to others. However, this argument really hinges on the assumption that companion cats are comparable to small children, that they're dependents and that we have a moral duty to protect and police them. And some people view cats this way. However, others do not. And this comment on the left here is a direct response to the one on the right, contesting the idea that cats need to be protected and, protected for their own good because they're living beings and they're independent and that freedom should be respected. So the cat is being compared more to a wild animal than to a child or a dependent that needs protecting. So companion animal guardians often use narratives akin to the parent-child bond. For example, see Owen Grauerhaus's 2019 to describe their relationships with the companion animal. However, there are different ideas about what constitutes good or bad parenting, and how human personality affects the nature of care provided to dependents has been well established in the psychology literature surrounding parent-child relations. And this has recently been extended to multi-species relationships. Taking cat guardianship as an exemplar, Thinker et al. Used the Big Five inventory to assess agreeableness, conscientiousness, extrovertism, neuroticism, and openness in cat guardians, and used this to extend the theory of pet parenting styles. So neuroticism was associated with a decreased likelihood of guardians permitting their cats to roam unaccompanied, and higher extrovertism scores were associated with the opposite trend. So they were more likely to be okay with their cat roaming. Conscientiousness in the human was associated with a cat displaying more gregarious behavioral styles, which perhaps explains why some people describe cats as being aloof and others as being loving and playful. They're actually reacting to the human personality. Focusing on cat predation habits, Crowley et al. Also published typologies of cat guardians, classifying them as either concerned protectors who were focused on their cat safety, freedom defenders who prioritized cat independence, what they called tolerant guardians who believed outdoor access is important, but didn't really like their cat's hunting habits, conscientious caretakers who feel some responsibility for managing their cat's hunting behaviors, and laissez-faire landlords who were largely unaware of the issues surrounding basically their cat just did what they wanted. So both these studies were focused on self-identified cat guardians, but Zito et al. Found caretakers of free living or neighborhood cats often do not perceive themselves as cat guardians, despite their heavy investment in a particular cat or cat welfare. And from my data, some people who live with a cat describe the relationship more as a mutual friendship. For example, commenters sometimes told stories of how a cat just showed up one day and now eats their food and sleeps on their sofa. So if we go back to this slide here, the comment on the right is clearly comparing their cat to a small child who arguably may be happy running about freely unattended. But from a safety perspective, that's obviously a problem. And then on the left, we have somebody responding to concerns that cats is not safe for cats outside, and they're pointing out that the cat is an intelligent adult animal that knows how to look after themselves. So we've got this broad spectrum of ideas all coming from people who care about their cats, but just have different ideas about what a cat needs, what is safe, what their role is as a guardian. So one thing that was lacking is acknowledgement of cats as individuals. At least in the comments, everyone appeared to believe they knew what was best for cats and largely spoke as if all cats were the same. However, when you look more closely, that's not exactly true. And there are examples of how cats asserted their will or refused to conform. And my case studies, which I don't have time to talk about today, will drill down more into subjectivity of cat-human relations. So to summarize what was actually a large body of data, cats were talked about either as helpless dependents that needed to be protected and nurtured, much like small children, as friends or perhaps adult family members whose agency to come and go needs to be respected, or somewhere in between, perhaps like teenage humans who need some freedom and trust to live happy, healthy lives. And that's where a lot of the disagreement and I guess it's akin to parent shaming goes on online with disagreements with how cats should be cared for or managed. However, the discourses surrounding free roaming cats is not only about cat guardians wanting what's best for their cat. There are many other issues such as the predation of wildlife, free living cats who don't have a human home, and disputes over free roaming neighborhood cats defecating on lawns or just existing, which I'm addressing in the other two chapters. With a view to understand some of the diverse and convoluted ways people think about and engage with cats, whether it's their own or neighborhood cats. So while I think it is worthwhile to attempt the question of whether cats have a right to roam from a moralistic or philosophical perspective, I find real world discourse is much more fascinating. And understanding these will be fundamental to the success of any educational or behavioral change initiatives. For example, those aiming to reduce predation in areas where it is a problem, those seeking to protect or help free living cats, or to resolve conflicts between neighbours. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions, criticisms, or suggestions. And if you're watching this recording, you may, of course, contact me by email or check out my webpage and learn more about my research.